today's world of high-speed connection, text messaging, and social networking, we often find ourselves searching for information. There are millions of blogs on the internet. News, sports, politics, and tech. But I bring it all together for you and present it in a relentlessly unconventional fashion. My name is Zenny Abraham, and this is the Blog Report. It's time now for news.
Rasimir Karimi was elected sheriff, and now you're suspended. But for those people who don't know you, who are watching, say, Bangladesh, tell them who you are.
To the few people who don't know this story, so I'm Rasimir Karimi. I honored and proud to have been a supervisor, a city and county supervisor for 7 years, representing District 5. And then last November, I was elected sheriff at the same time when Ed Lee was elected mayor and George Gascon was elected district attorney. It was the first time in 25 years that anybody progressive had been elected to a citywide executive office. And so this really perked up eyebrows and ears by our victory last November against a hotly contested race of I had several other opponents. And we really started to make our mark early on, once winning that race and leading up to me taking office.
Now, tell my viewers in your words what happened on New Year's Eve night.
It's actually December 31st day, New Year's Eve day, where my wife and I were heading towards this direction for lunch, actually, to a place where they don't take reservations.
It
was
where were you going?
Delfina's Pizza
over here. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were quarreling.
I didn't know that. I just happened to pick this spot.
No, it's exactly correct.
Wow.
We're going there. They don't take reservations. It was New Year's Eve day. We're with our then 2.5-year-old son.
Theo.
That's right. Our beautiful little boy.
Say Happy Father's Day, brother.
Thank you. It's bittersweet not having my family here, but I get through because I'm able to communicate by Skype with my son who's in Venezuela with his mother. But we were on our way, and the quarrel, which is something that had been unresolved, is about long bouts, trips that my wife would take with our son abroad to Venezuela for some months. And this time we were talking about a plan which we didn't come to an agreement to. And I turned the car around against my wife's wishes, which is considered, in what I eventually pled to, as a misdemeanor, false imprisonment. So we didn't go to lunch. I turned the car around against her wishes, so we didn't argue here. And then, after parking the car and reacting intensely and wrongly on my part to the argument we were having, to try to de-escalate or just try to respond in a way that obviously wasn't smart, I reached out and grabbed my wife's arm, and it got bruised on the right under here. She had shared this information with a neighbor whom she thought was an attorney.
Her name is Irene Madison.
That's right.
Okay.
And without, in confining to this neighbor, because of, in my wife's words, of what we've since read over the last few months and understand, is a potential custody issue, which was related to the argument we had earlier, confining to this neighbor. The neighbor went ahead without my wife's consent, betrayed, from what we can tell, and began to float this story and my wife's information to a number of people, not authorities, but to other people like Phil Bronstein. Phil Bronstein, the executive editor of one of the editors of the Chronicle.
Since left, yeah.
Since left, and other people.
Yeah, right.
And then
was his wife, or was Phil directly?
Phil directly.
Okay.
And they're good friends with both of them, I understand, Christine and Phil, and other people. And then several days later, after that had occurred, contacted authorities, and then that became a runaway train. And whether, conspiracy theorist or whomever wants to believe that this is opportunity for those who didn't support me in office, like police and others, to get me out, whatever your version is, I mean, this is the ammunition that they've been running with to use against me to try to remove me from the elected position of sheriff under the grounds of official misconduct.
Was Ivory not a supporter? I thought she was. Or...
She was a supporter. Yeah,
Did-
absolutely.
Were you two friends at one point, or like did you know
I
that?
wouldn't say friendly. I was neighborly with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I always am and have been. But I didn't have a rapport with her that my wife had. Yeah.
Now, you took a plea deal, right? As I understand
I
it.
did.
Yeah.
I wanted to put the case behind us, although, to be honest with you, I was more interested in fighting out in trial. But our jury consultant said that the constant barrage, punishing barrage of negative press day after day after day, which was essentially controlling the narrative, and our inability and frankly our failure to respond when I think we should have in the first month or two of this really helped define, I think, a level of bias that was evident in the jury pool. So after 200 plus questionnaires, 5-page questionnaires that were disseminated to over that many jurors, the rate was so high of bias that we had to seriously consider about the fairness of a trial. And there wasn't going to be a venue change, as we knew in advance from the judge. We were thinking like a venue change would have been, but he wasn't going to do it for a misdemeanor trial.
Yeah.
So it was almost like, well, do you go forward with it? On one hand, many of us wanted to, and the other is put it behind us. And I pled to a charge that is a step above disturbing the peace, and it does not preclude me from serving in my capacity as sheriff in the eyes of the federal, state, or even local law. And I thought we could put this behind me. But then a week later, after my plea, the mayor then decided to file charges of misconduct, and that's what they're still pursuing and what we're fighting.
How was your relation with the mayor before all this started?
Cordial, collegial. I mean, we were not supportive of each other, but we weren't working against each other really at the time as well. I mean, don't forget, this is a mayor that was selected to be interim mayor, and I was one of 11 supervisors who believed him when he said he would only be an interim mayor too. So when he informed us that he wanted to be just interim mayor, just for that 1 year, he was selected based on the premise that he wasn't going to run. So that changes the climate a little bit when the three of us find each other elected to an office where we come from a place that wasn't necessarily intellectually honest.
How today Ivory Madison and the city attorney's office have released a document that
It's a declaration.
Right.
Yeah, it's their witness, a declaration.
that challenges what you say happened and everything else. What say you about that? What,
well,
if anything, you know?
I mean, I think since Madison was the one who was developing a rapport with my wife, and my wife's understanding that she was her attorney, it sounds like a very, the best defense is a good offense, and that's what it sounds like it is from Madison's perspective, is trying to go on the attack against me and my wife in order to fortify their actions.
So you're saying that Madison is her attorney, was acting as her attorney? Was she legally hired to be your wife's attorney?
Well, that's a good question for my wife in one respect, but everything that's come out since then, that's exactly what my wife had thought. That was her attorney, and my wife was, needless to say, shocked when Madison decided to take actions in her own hand to release a video. My wife said she never wanted her to
So your
release.
wife is alleging attorney-client privilege was damaged? If that is,
That's why you should
kind
talk to my wife about that,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
her attorney about that. But yeah, that was well reported on, that the actions that Ms. Madison took were without consent of my wife.
Now, the next step in this is the Ethics Commission hearing, right?
It's been ongoing installments of an ethics panel. It is an appointed body. 5 members on the ethics panel. They're essentially volunteer public servants, appointed by the mayor, the district attorney, city attorney, assessor, and the board of supervisors. So they have a lot of power in this case. And this case is a very unprecedented case for San Francisco. I mean, I was duly elected, received considerably more votes than Mayor Lee himself. And for the mayor to single-handedly remove an elected peer without pay, suspension without pay, without due process, and not explain to me what the removal was, and then months later then develop the charges through this ethics panel leaves quite a bit for challenge, which is what we're challenging them in this ethics panel. There's been several hearings, and there'll be several more. Once the ethics panel hears the evidence on the mayor's case against us and us in our defense, it goes to the Board of Supervisors, where they will have 30 days to render a decision for reinstatement or not.
Now, if this comes out not in your favor, what will you do next? And if it comes out in your favor, what then? Let's take.
Well, we can
a little bit
interview
more,
some other time, to seeing what the outcome might be. If it's not in my favor, and what the B or C plan might be, and then in my favor, I will resume my position as sheriff and continue to move forward as to what the voters elected me to do last November. And I was active sheriff for almost 3 months before I was suspended without pay. And there was quite a bit I had been doing, and in my inaugural on January 8th in the Herbst Theater in front of nearly 1,000 people, I made it very clear where policy must meet vision. And as the sheriff, I said, San Francisco often gets to rest on its liberal laurels as if it's that progressive or cutting edge, and when it comes to criminal justice, I don't always find that so. When I see our county jail population is 60% African American, and nobody speaks of the nexus between a disproportionate population where 1 out of 14 black men are in San Francisco's county jail, and they talk about the outmigration of African Americans from the city going to more affordable places, they never talk about actually that they're not just going to the East Bay or the North, they're actually going to county jail. And that discussion is never, ever brought up in mainstream circles. So I did that in my inaugural. And the Jim Crow laws that were vanquished of yesteryear, especially of the South, I think have mutated to find themselves in the criminal justice system, even in liberal bastions like San Francisco.
On that subject, in a way, I got to ask you.
And I think it's threatening when I talk like that.
Folks, we'll be right back with more from the Blogosphere.
Their power turns into greed and selfishness. They don't care about.
Those guys are fabulous.
So she's making steps slowly to.
Not too many people could in the way that Barack Obama had.
It's kind of the best radio show in Southern California.
These billionaires financing these jokers of a governor.
With the concepts of Mission Impossible, we're always knocked out.
Go look at John Connor. We know that film is in 3D, and our job creation is excited. I did 2 commencement speeches last
Jenny Cranberry, what all emperors drink.
That's right.
Including everybody, but I don't know how it can not include everybody. It's great that it's spread all over the world, and everybody's just really coming together. Standing is going to be super fun. Basically, they're the main contestants, and then 10 other contestants. They're business first.
Yeah.
We got the bloggers. Annie Abraham was texting me last night in the middle of the show going,
Going 7:57, I believe. Sick and tired of this kind of shit.
Folks, we'll be right back with more from the Blogosphere.
What do you say to supporters who feel in some kind of way, and I hate to ask it this way, but I may be betrayed. In other words, and they want to find a reason to get back on your side. I mean, because you're going through counseling.
Because the punishment doesn't fit the crime.
Okay.
I mean, what I did was wrong, and I have, since the outset of this, said, number one, I have to believe in the process. When I was a supervisor coming into being sheriff, I said, I have to believe in the process. I'm a public servant. I want to. I don't necessarily like the way that they're leveraging the process as a hammer to try to oust me, but I have to believe in the integrity of the process, and will continue to advocate for the integrity of a legal process and of a civil administrative process that is hopefully even in its justice, and it hasn't been. And for what I did with my wife, I acted wrong. And what I did, I am accepted full responsibility for completely and taken action to address that. But people must also remember that as the District 5 supervisor who tackled violent crime, because I inherited a district that had the second highest homicide rate for years, which has since plummeted, and as a candidate for sheriff who said that if we want to reduce repeat offender rates, recidivism, we must also learn that to improve public safety, we must appreciate what the power of redemption looks like. And the power of redemption is something that is easier said than done. And that means even in a city like San Francisco, it means giving people second chances. Never in my wildest nightmare did I imagine I could be an example of that need. I'm serious about that.
Wow.
And because of what I've gone through does not disqualify me at all from being sheriff. I can still carry a weapon based on the charge that I pled to in the eyes of the federal, state, and local government. There is nothing that inhibits me, prohibits me from exercising my authority as the elected sheriff. Nothing at all. What forces like the mayor and others are doing are using this as a hammer point to try to just oust me because they are couching that as misconduct. It's not misconduct, but that's what we're fighting.
Now,
and if it was, that means that other high-profile incidences of, say, former mayors or elected officials or appointed officials would have also been brought up on similar charges and never were.
Now,
so it looks selective.
A couple of good friends of mine in your sheriff department told me that you are on your way to making some significant reforms.
It was.
Can you talk about those?
Sure. I mean, there were quite a few reforms, and some within the deputy sheriffs to their benefit, even though that they supported my opponent, and they often didn't support my predecessor in his 8 terms of office, Mike Hennessy, who supported me and still does, by the way. I talked to Sheriff Mike Hennessy, and is also submitting a declaration on my behalf to the ethics trial as well, too. So, first of all, I think the deputy sheriffs are talented men and women who are credentialed in the same exact way as a police officer. And I believe that the deputy sheriffs have something in addition to offer to the management of the county jail system and their programs that are associated with the sheriff's department. It can also help, I think, with policing in San Francisco when the police are having staffing deficiencies. And I don't think that people should take the sheriffs for granted or dismiss, I think, how effective they can be, and they're paid less than PD, so they would actually be saving taxpayers money. And those were some of the reforms that we had in queue, just as I was being, in terms of getting them more activated in a larger public safety way. Other reforms is that we had been working with Delancey Street. The director of Delancey, the founder, co-founder, Mimi Silbert, in creating a first-of-its-kind pod inside the county jail that instead of waiting for somebody to exit the jail system through either prison parole or county jail and probation and get accepted into Delancey, which is like getting accepted into Harvard, by the way, a high standard of acceptance. Acceptance is that we'd actually take Delancey inside the jail system and begin to work with inmates before they're out so that they will be at a level ready for rehabilitation that will make them less likely to repeat their offense, because San Francisco's repeat offender rates are at 65%, which means that recidivism is still very high. Means reason police are as active as they do is not dealing with first-time criminals, but repeat offenders. And you want to get to the first 6 months, as all studies have shown, the first 6 months when somebody's released, they are 10 times more likely to offend in the first 6 months than those after that. So that's why we're about ready to move inside the jail system to have this kind of continuity that's never been established before with organizations like Delancey.
Now let's do some house cleaning. It's reported in the media, even to this day, and I think it's a mistake, that you're convicted of domestic violence. You are not. It was dropped, right? Those charges were dropped.
3 charges of misdemeanors were dropped, and then the charge that I had pled to was a false imprisonment known as 236. And the stipulation to that had to do with the incident of December 31st, and that had to do with me against my wife's wishes turning the car around from us going to lunch.
But
That's what false imprisonment
is what's reported around by some blogs is that you're convicted of domestic violence, which you are not, correct?
Well, it depends what. Yes, I mean, I say yes.
Okay.
I mean, in the sense that
on
me
legal,
going
strict
to
legal, I'm just trying to get this
well,
out of the way.
technically speaking, I think the answer is yes, of course, because I think that's the charge that they were waging, and that's what's that's what false imprisonment in this case is what they are associating it with. Yes.
And then you also asked that the legal charges be picked up by the city, but that was the city attorney said no, right?
The what charges? I'm sorry.
Your legal expenses.
Oh well, I'm elected like the mayor is, and technically I should be a client also of the city because I was suspended without pay, without due process, and they didn't reveal the counts or the charges until 2 months later.
Huh.
I had no legal representation, and because I was suspended without pay, because I was completely incapacitated from providing for my family, which necessitated my wife and son to go back to her home country, Venezuela, and I'm able to barely pay for any attorneys. It was only, I think, a very valid request that I have the city also help cover my legal expenses. And what the Examiner recently reported just the other day is that the city's now spent over $1 million to prosecute me.
Wow, my God.
So if they're spending unlimited resources of taxpayer-funded dollars to prosecute me, then I think it's only legitimate that I ask for, well, I'm entitled, I think, to a just defense. But when they do things like suspend me without pay, I'm not even eligible for unemployment.
What?
So
Seriously?
Seriously. So
what about your pension?
Well, that doesn't come into play in this discussion.
Interesting.
So I have no income. I'm fighting for my job, so I'm not going to have time to go for another job, really, working on my case. And the fact that they have prevented me from seeing my wife, who I have not seen since January 13th, on a stay-away order that my wife never asked for, never wanted. She never called
and just
authorities.
on timeline, today is June 17th. Just to, wow, it's a long...
It's over 6 months.
Yeah.
I haven't seen her. They won't let me talk to her either.
You can't fly there to see her or anything, nothing.
Well, I can see my son,
Yeah.
at least they're supposed to be, but they've stopped me from seeing him too, and there's literally no restriction.
Who's the they we're
District
talking
Attorney
about?
objects.
Okay.
District Attorney objects, and the courts have agreed with the DA. We're going into court this week, actually, to fight that, because they've gone too far. But you kind of have to view this as a little bit of a choking strategy to just kind of wear me down to the point where maybe he'll just resign if we make it hard enough. And that's not just me who's arrived at that. That's the scores of people who come up to me in the streets who read what they read like you do and say like, Jesus, man, they've gone way too far. And those are the very common comments that I get from all quarters of San Francisco. And they have gone too far. Punishment doesn't fit the crime.
So in closing, anything else to add?
Well, I mean, I was duly elected. I mean, what would be a precedent-making event is removing somebody who's democratically elected by a mayor, city attorney, and a government process that would be undermining the will of the voters. Let the voters decide.
Yeah.
Let them decide in lieu of what they're trying to do, and let's see how that shakes out. But the way they're going about it means that whoever they don't like in the future, they can apply this process in what I think can be a very reckless, specious way, to say the least. And I think it deserves a great amount of challenge. And I've got people come up to me who've been longtime supporters as a supervisor and as a candidate for sheriff and a sheriff, and people who don't support me, who didn't support me, say, we don't like your politics, you're too progressive, too independent, whatever, but do support me in this because they think the city's gone too far.
How has this changed you?
Because if they can do it to me, they can do it to anybody.
How has this changed you as a person? I know you said you were going through counseling or went through, or not counseling, but what is
I decided to go into therapy some months ago, and then I go to counseling associated with the court case too. So I get a pretty heavy dose, and I like it. You know, I think it's important because this is a lot of stress.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a man who's essentially seeing his legacy completely compromised, my future preempted, and my family essentially distanced, not from either my wife or my desire, and my son as well too, is collateral damage from that. And this is a system that really seems to be applying at very high cost everything they can to remove me from office. And I got to tell you, I mean, it's humiliating. It's devastating. It's destroyed, who I thought of myself for many months, and put me put me through a period. Well, it's less confident certainly now. I mean, not as confident. Somebody who is just feeling on top of the world, into a place where I was just elected sheriff, have a beautiful family, and neglected the kind of things I think I should watch out for, that arrived at a place where there was distress between me and my wife and family, etc. But all that did not earn or merit the level of vitriol and the level of attack and retribution that is occurring right now. It's the wrong example to set in a city that prides itself on being just and fair and forward-thinking. It's just the wrong example to set in San Francisco, which is why we're fighting this. So whatever the outcome is, at this stage, it's important to not let it go unchallenged. It really is important. No matter what one may think of me, my politics. In fact, I encourage people, don't even take my word for it. Take my wife's word for it, Ileana. Because if the mayor or if the neighbor wants to justify their actions using Ileana, well, Ileana, in her April 6 opinion piece that was published in the Chronicle, I think spells it out really well as to how people should interpret this. So they should refer to her, I think, perspective. Don't even have to refer to mine.
I'm going to ask, because people have been hammering with us, how do you respond to the allegation that you were trying to influence witnesses?
Completely false. In fact, I was the last to know, and that's what's so amazing what the mayor and others were doing, including the neighbors, to manufacture that. This notion of dissuasion was completely manufactured. We're going to blow a hole through that. And if, they think they still have something to, to try to assert, well, they're inventing it as they go along. And that's what this whole case has been about for them. They're just piling on circumstantial and hearsay evidence and throwing it against the wall like spaghetti to see what sticks. That's what they're doing. Because the burden of proof in a civil and administrative process is a much different level of burden and standard than it is in a criminal case. In this case, rumor can be proof.
On that note, Ross, hell of a Father's Day.
Hell of a Father's Day, but good to see you,
Great
and
to see you.
happy Father's Day to all. And let's keep positive and move forward.